I'm so tiny! I'm so tiny! This chair I bought when I first moved out because I felt like I needed another chair. Never once used it. And then I moved home. Now I use it all the time. But I need a better setup because it's not working. Great chair. But anyways, today's book is... What is today's book? It's a good book. But I should have been in bed an hour ago. Oh, today's book is Enchanted by Gail, Carson, Levine. Ooh, that one took me a second. Oh, I'm so happy that I still love this book. If you're familiar with Ella Enchanted, one, you probably know there's a movie starring Anne Hathaway, which is absolutely horrible, so I don't recommend that. But you'll also know this is basically a middle grade novel. It's a retelling of Cinderella, and I've read it countless times over the last 20 years, and it never fails to entertain me, which I find incredible considering the book for next week I read when I was in my late teens, early 20s. Loved it then, which is why it was supposed to be in the lineup for this month until I reread it. And I was like, holy cow, what was I thinking? So I'm like, how, when I was 18, 19, 20, 21, could I have loved a book, hated it when I'm my age now, yet I read a book when I was 14 and I still love it. Maybe it's because I love fairy tales. I love fairy tale retellings. And this one is done so well. I wish it were longer, actually. There's so much that I thought could have been done if only it were given more time. But before I get into the book, I want to say I'm a pirate. Audiobooks are expensive, and I really hate the idea of buying an audiobook and then disliking it. So I generally get my audiobooks from the library, and then I'll import them onto my computer. And this one I couldn't find at my library, and I got burned with the last audiobook that I bought. So I was like, I don't want to buy this one. I remembered something a friend of mine had recently said where I can get them on YouTube. So I went on YouTube and I found one. It wasn't the official audiobook, and it said the unofficial audiobook, and if I can figure out some way to link it, I will. It was actually quite good. My biggest problem was the audio composition. It definitely sounded like a bunch of, I don't know how amateur or how professional these voice actors were, but it sounded like a bunch of disparate actors recorded in their homes with various levels of professional equipment. They all mailed their recordings and somebody cobbled them together. That was my biggest issue, was that not that the voice actors did a bad job, but it didn't sound entirely professional. I quite enjoyed the young woman who voiced Ella. She had that substance to her, and she was very pleasant to listen to while also age appropriate. I would give this audiobook, this unofficial audiobook that I got for free off of YouTube, I'd give it like a 4.7 out of 5 stars. If only it had been composed more professionally, then it would have been a home run, a grand slam. At any rate, the book is about this young girl named Ella. We watch her travel through her adolescence as she struggles with this gift or curse that has been bestowed upon her at birth. And that is the curse or the gift of obedience. And I call it a curse gift because the fairy Lucinda considers these that she's bestowing as gifts, yet the people that she bestows them upon see them as curses. So she likes to go to weddings and births and events like that and gift people. When Ella is born, she won't stop crying, and so Lucinda gifts her with obedience. And that just means that anytime somebody gives her a command, she has to obey. Whether it is malicious or innocent, she cannot say no. And obviously, this poses inherent problems. An early example is when she is 5 at her birthday, somebody tells her, eat your cake. So she does. And she keeps eating and eating and eating until somebody realizes she's not going to stop and they tell her to stop. Or like when she tells one of the servant children about her curse or gift, and this person obviously abuses it. It's one of those things where it seems like a good idea at the time, but there are a lot of things that can go wrong with it. Her quest, basically through this book, is to find Lucinda and get Lucinda to take this curse away from her. She's always known that she has a fairy godmother, and it turns out that the fairy godmother is their cook, Mandy. Mandy tells her, well, Mandy, cannot lift this curse because it's big magic. And I forget if it's only the fairy who bestows it, but I don't think so. I think it's the fact that it is big magic, and fairies shouldn't do big magic because you never know what the consequence is. Like, okay, if I make it stop raining, well, maybe it never rains again and we're in a drought. Or maybe I could create a hurricane somewhere else. This is the explanation for why Mandy or fairies just don't do certain things. All Ella wants is to find Lucinda so that she no longer has to do everything she's told. Among this, we start out with her at her mother's funeral because she and her mother had both gotten sick. Mandy, as their fairy godmother, had given them a soup. Inside the soup had been hair from a unicorn. Because Mandy has to do what she's told, she drinks the soup with the unicorn hair in it. She gets better. Her mother takes it out and she dies. So we're at this funeral, and this is where we meet Prince Charmant, or Prince Char, which for some reason this time around it just bothered me. Prince Char. I liked the Char. Anyways, so they form this friendship and they have this great little camaraderie. Because we meet her dad, and it is obvious that he's an absentee parent. He is a merchant, and he is not a very honest merchant. He's very greedy, and he's just not a nice guy. And so he ends up sending Ella to finishing school because she's very clumsy. I don't know. He saw other reasons that he was like, you need to go to finishing school. So she is sent off to finishing school with these two horrible sisters named Hattie and Olive. Hattie realizes very quickly that Ella is going to do everything she's told. So she first steals the necklace that Ella had inherited from her mother, and then she basically turns her into her servant. And then also while she's at finishing school, it turns into, because she gets command after command after command, like she kind of becomes a star pupil, but she's always found ways to fight the curse. Like if someone says, oh, bring me that, instead of bringing all she needs to bring, she'll bring one. And so she found little ways. So even though she was a star pupil, she found ways to make her teachers dislike her because she found ways to combat their commands. In any case, she learns to sew, she learns to sing, she learns to dance, she learns to do all those things. But then she also makes a friend who is another outcast. There becomes a point where Hattie says, you can't be friends with her anymore. Ella, in order to circumvent this, decides to run away. She has already tricked Hattie into revealing why she doesn't like her so much, and it's essentially because Hattie's jealous. Ella decides she has a magic book. And in this magic book, she sees a letter from her father about how he's going to a giant wedding. So she's like, oh my gosh, maybe at this wedding, I'll find Lucinda. And not only will I find Lucinda, but I won't have to break my best friend's heart. She sets off, and she eventually finds herself in the land of, I think it's the elves? From there, she meets this great craftsman who her father has always been talking about, has never been able to trade a piece with or from, because he just thinks that they are terrible traders. They have no idea what's going on. And basically, they're like, no, your dad's just a jerk. But because you can appreciate these things, here's a gift. So they take care of her. They send her on her way with food and a pony. She falls asleep one night and she wakes up to a band of ogres. And these ogres have eaten her pony and they are taking her home and they are going to eat her. And the thing about the ogres is that they can talk you into doing anything. Again, this is really bad for her because they can also figure out what your greatest weakness is. Like, they can see inside, they know all of your secrets. So they're like, basically, she'll cook herself. But she, because she's good with languages, is able to use their own magic against them. She is escaping them when she is sort of rescued, when she is stumbled upon by Prince Charmant and his fellow soldiers. She gets to the land of the giants and she finds Lucinda, only to discover that Lucinda has gifted this newlywed pair with the ability to never leave each other's side, which sounds great, except it's not, because we all need time away. If you can't have time away, bad things will happen. So she does speak to Lucinda underneath the guise of being somebody else. Lucinda does not free her of her curse, but she commands her to just be happy with it. She flags down her father and takes her home, and Mandy is under the impression that it's another curse that she's been under rather than just a command. During this time, her father had lost all their fortunes. So he's like trying to figure out a way to get their money back. So he's going to marry her off. He brings this rich old guy by. Turns out the rich old guy is not actually that rich because he just lost his money as well. But in the interim, he has Mandy cook their food with this mushroom that will cause people to fall in love. The old guy can't eat it because he doesn't like mushrooms or he's allergic or something, but Ella does. So she's all besotted with him until the father realizes this guy has no money, so he rejects the guy's offer of marriage. And this is when Mandy is like, hey, I've been thinking, like, was it a new spell or was it just a command? So this is when she frees Ella from the command, and Ella's like, oh my gosh, I made a fool out of myself. From here, the father's like, okay, so I don't have anybody for you, but I do think I've got somebody for me. And who do you think it turns out to be? The mother of Olive and Hattie. And I gotta say, I thought Olive was hilarious because she's pretty dumb and she's incredibly greedy. All she wants is money and all she wants is attention. And so she's always like, Ella, 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 pay attention to me, talk to me, tell me stories. So the dad and Olga get married. Lucinda attends the wedding. She decrees that they will always love each other, which is interesting because they both love and hate. So it's like he will always love her and think of her, but he doesn't want to be anywhere near her. So he just automatically starts traveling. At this point, this is when the stepmother turns Ella into a servant. However, Prince Char does reappear at the wedding and they have this great time together. He visits her the next day, but Hattie orders her to stay in her room, and then he visits the next day, and once again, Hattie orders her to stay in her room. So it's at this point that they become pen pals. He has gone off to this other kingdom because that's just what they do, is they go to each other's kingdoms at a certain point and they just experience the other culture. So they form this relationship. At some point, Char says, I love you. Like, I can't hold it in anymore. I love you. She is super duper excited until she wakes up in the middle of the night and she's like, I can't be his queen. Like, this curse will be the end of us. Like, I could be ordered to kill him. There's no way to hide me away. She lies to him and she writes a letter pretending to be Hattie saying, that she had run off with somebody else and this whole thing had been a joke. Now she's just really miserable. There's another, I don't know, 6 months of time. Char is coming back. We are having those balls that everybody knows so well. Although technically, I don't know how many people know that there's more than one ball. In the cartoon, there's only one, but there's, I think, 3 in reality. In this book, at any rate, there are 3. And she's like, I want to go to these balls. A little something that I glossed over is that at this point, when she tells Prince Char she won't marry him, she comes to Mandy just in tears. And Mandy is like, okay, this selfless act is what I needed to see that you have grown and matured, and now I'm gonna do something that I should have done a long time ago. She calls Lucinda forth. She tricks Lucinda into doing 2 things. One is living life as a squirrel, and the other is subjecting herself to one of her gifts. So at the end of this 6-month or 1-year period, Lucinda comes back and she's like, I was wrong. But she refused to lift the curse off of Ella because it was big magic. And she's like, you have no idea what's going to happen if I do this with big magic. But you can break the curse. You just have to figure out how. Ella, throughout this book, has always tried to resist the curse. And it hasn't worked. She has physical repercussions for when she tries to not do what she's ordered to do. But for these balls, she says, I want to see him one last time. I won't have anything to do with him, but I want to see him. So because Mandy won't use magic of any sort, she uses just the bare minimum of magic, Ella calls upon Lucinda, and this is where the coach comes from, and this is where the dress and the jewelry and all those things, well, technically not the dress because they already had dresses. And so she goes to the first ball and she just can't help herself. So she interacts with Char. Then the second ball, she interacts with him a little bit more. And then the third ball, so I don't know, this is something that if I had an issue, it was this, where he has decided never to get married. And Ella is really nobody. I mean, she's somebody that he enjoys spending time with. She's a friend of his. But with all of this knowledge, I can't help but ask myself, why does he introduce her to his family? Because they're obviously being like, hint, hint, nudge, nudge, we're so glad you're going to be part of the family. And he is determined not to get married. So why is he so excited to introduce her to his family if it's only going to be platonic? Anyways, he does. He is waiting for her by this third ball, takes her to meet his family, and then they're dancing. And Hattie, who has been trying to worm her way into his affections, so they're dancing, and Hattie dances past and unties the mask because it was a masked ball, and exposes Ella. So Ella races home only to be pursued by Char, who has no idea how she's been living. So she's brought out. She's now back in her servant's garb, and he's like, why'd you lie to me? Here's your glass slipper, and obviously it fits. And so now we're at this point of no return where he essentially commands her to marry him. He's like, marry me. So she says, okay. But then we have Hattie who's like, don't marry him, go to your room. And so she's torn between her love for Char, her desire to marry him, his request for her to marry him, and then Hattie and all that entails, because she's always known if she marries him with this curse and with her stepfamily's knowledge of this curse, they're going to use it for their advantage and nothing good will come from it. It is this love for him and this desire to keep her beloved homeland safe that enables her to break the curse. She's finally able to say, no, I'm not going to do what you say. I'm not going to do what you say. I'm going to do what I want to do. So she breaks the curse and they end up living happily ever after. Her father, who had completely abandoned her to the whims of her stepfamily, doesn't even get the letter because I think they got married like a week. Well, no, I think the father and the stepmother got married in a week. I think she and Char got married in like a month. So yeah, he misses the wedding. Obviously, her stepfamily's not invited to the wedding, although ironically, Olive does get married. She marries some old guy who she doesn't want to get married, but he's like, I'll pay you to marry me. So she's like, okay. He'll pay me every week and he'll listen to everything I have to say because he's sad and old and alone. I think Hattie and Olga live miserably ever after. She's able to resume her friendship with the girl from boarding school, and it was, I don't know what it is about this book. I just greatly enjoy it. It gives me everything I want from a fairy tale retelling. It's not sappy. It's brand new. It's fresh, but it also follows the lines of what we know. It's almost like Stepsister by Jennifer Donnelly, which I posted a year ago, maybe, where it's another retelling of Cinderella. And in that one, you get a different view of the stepsisters and you get a different view as to the circumstances of why Cinderella becomes Cinderella. But I liked that we get more depth and insight and backstory to the Cinderella story. It's not just, oh, she's a poor soul and nobody loves her. This is a book that I think I will love forever, and it's kind of inspiring. It's kind of something that I would love to write myself, just bigger. Like, take the elements of her Enchanted Cinderella story and just expand it a little bit more. Make it a little bit more mature. Give it some more layers. Expand this world a little bit more. But I enjoyed the romance. I enjoyed her growth through adolescence. I loved that Ella never took no for an answer. Like, she never got defeated. She would feel defeated, but then she would always be like, look, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to fight back in any way I can. I liked the mythical elements, like the magical mythical elements of, the ogres and the centaurs and the elves and the giants and the magic. I liked the way that the author explained away why you have a fairy godmother that won't do anything. I loved the love she had for her mother, and all she wants is acceptance and freedom. It's such a good book. I wish the movie hadn't been ruined. It could have been such a good movie, even with Anne Hathaway. Like, it was so corny. Anyways, have you read this book, or are there any childhood books of yours that you still love, no matter how old you get? There we go. I'll see you next week. Bye.